Hey everyone, welcome to video 2 of our second set of Game Grid FNM videos. I'm Dan.
This is Drew.
And in this video we're going to cover Drew's Delver list versus Blue-White Control played by
Jake. Yep.
Sorry, Jake.
Jake's playing. This is kind of the more creature-heavy version of his blue-white. I call it a control deck. Yeah, I mean, he has Day of Judgment, Sun Titans, Phantasmal Images. So basically, he's looking to set up the long game, get a Sun Titan out, get a couple images back, maybe get some of his guys back. He plays a couple of aggressive creatures like Silverblade Paladin. So we'll see that in this video. I'm playing Delver this week again. This list is a little bit different than the week I won with a couple weeks ago. I went back up to 3 Restoration Angels. That appears to be pretty much the norm now for the standard decks.
I believe the statement is if you're playing white, you should be playing Restoration Angel.
It seems like it's getting to that point. This guy is totally awesome. A lot of people are commenting that if you ever played versus Fairies several years ago in standard, he plays like a Mistbind Click in the Fairies deck. And what that means is that Mistbind Click made plays when you're playing versus the fairy deck very awkward, because when they had 4 mana, you didn't know if they had a Cryptic Command or a Mistbind Click. And if they had both, no matter what play you made, would be bad.
Gotcha.
So that was kind of what really made sometimes playing versus fairies very frustrating, and this deck operates kind of similarly now with Restoration Angel, because say you have a mana leak in your graveyard, and you have 4 mana, now your opponent's like, do they have a Snapcaster Mage, or do they have a Restoration Angel? So again, it operates in a very similar fashion.
And it's worth noting that both players in this video are playing Restoration Angels. Yep. Jake has them as well. What you're looking at, we had an early Snapcaster to kind of put the pressure on, knowing that Drew was playing Delver, and Drew follows up with a timely reinforcement.
The other difference in this list is instead of Spectral Flights or Runechanter Pikes, I'm just playing straight up 3-sword. Oh, no. I think I'm playing 3-sword of War and Peace.
And not enough can be said about Sword of War and Peace. Yep. It's just one of those cards that changes games.
Yeah, it lets you attack through Lingering Souls. It lets you attack through a lot of
decks. There's so many decks running white that it does so much for the deck against so many other decks.
Yep.
Obviously, for both these players, sticking a Sword of War and Peace can change the game drastically when they're looking at card advantage. You guys trying to keep your hands filled with card advantages. We're looking at a Gitaxian Probe to see a Restoration Angel and a Consecrated Sphinx.
Right, and the other thing I was going to say was different about this list was the sideboard significantly different. In my sideboard, instead of kind of more conventional, just having cards to fill the gaps to answer sideboards, I kind of actually transform a little bit. So I have 2 Consecrated Sphinxes, 2 Day of Judgment, 3 Timely Reinforcements. Basically, what I do, I did a couple matches, is I side out all my Delvers and Geist of St. Traphs and board into like a more traditional blue-white control deck.
And can kind of throw people for the loop, especially if they, so many decks, their sideboards are like, okay, what do I need to consider my sideboard? Is I need to consider I'm going to be playing against Delver. And we talked about how popular the deck is, so a lot of sideboards are packing things to deal with Delver. And when you side it all out, it kind of like, oh, well, that sideboard card's a little awkward now.
Yeah, and actually that happened in one of my other games versus another Sun Titan deck, not versus Jacob, but I Gitaxian Probed him after game 2 when I had sided all my Delvers out and saw he had a dead weight in his hand. So kind of a nice feeling that, basically he essentially has a dead card. I mean, he can dead weight, like I leave 4 Snapcasters in because you still get plenty of value off of him, like right here.
Even if they die.
Yeah, because I Snapcaster into Timely Reinforcements because he's been applying pressure with 2 Snapcasters.
So yeah, Jacob, he's playing that strategy of trying to put the pressure on. He doesn't want to let Drew get set up, knowing that, if Drew kind of gets a lock on the board, things are going to be, rough for him, because that's what Delver wants to do. He wants to get there with his guys, throw that sword on a Delver or a Geist, and, call it a day. But this game, it goes a lot longer than I think either one of them anticipated, and we'll have a lot of fun things coming up.
Yeah, his long game's pretty good, though. I mean, he's got Gideons, he's got Sun Titans. So he's definitely got a very strong late game.
So I think there's something fun while we're watching this match to point out that I learned from Aaron the other day, and maybe this is news to some people, not others, is the interaction with Sun Titan and enchantments like Deadweight or Oblivion Ring with cards like Geist of St. Traphs.
Oblivion Ring won't work because Oblivion Ring is a triggered ability when it comes into play.
That's right.
But dead weight and pacifism work. Mm-hmm. Or like if you're really far out there, you can play arrest. But yeah, some Sun Titan lists were playing dead weights, and a couple months ago we're playing pacifisms, because the way the rules interaction works is that when an aura is coming into play from Sun Titan's ability from your graveyard, it actually doesn't target. So you can put it on a Geist of St. Traft.
So yeah, if you didn't get what we were talking about, that's what the Sun Titan recurring a permanent that costs 3 or less in the form of a dead weight onto a Geist of St. Traft circumvents the hexproof because it doesn't actually target in the traditional sense that hexproof interacts. So that's something fun that I picked up from Aaron mentioning it the other day, watching them play test some games. I was like, huh, that's good to keep in mind.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't come up that often, but when it does come up, it can be important.
So what we saw here is the Sun Titan hit the board. It brought back the Phantasmal image, which came back as a Sun Titan, which brought back the Snapcaster.
Yes, yeah, that's actually exactly what happened.
So that Phantasmal image is actually another Sun Titan, which brought back the Snapcaster. But Drew played the Consecrated Sphinx, and we're going to see some crazy card drawing mechanics here in a few minutes.
Actually I make a there's a bit of a rules confusion here with Sphinx triggers. And I basically just didn't clarify with Jake exactly what I was doing. At one point, Jake should have drawn 2 extra cards, but that would have enabled me to draw 4 extra cards. I'll explain it when it comes up. I think it's next turn, not this turn.
Because we're going to see, this is not the first time that Sun Titan is going to bring back that Phantasmal image.
It happened. I actually am kind of curious how many times the Sun Titan trigger went on the stack this game. It might be around 10 or so or more. So it happens quite a bit.
And that's with he doesn't have that many permanents in the graveyard, but that Sun Titan, they do work.
Yeah. So my plan here is I'm actually trying to basically get more cards than Jake. So he's on 3 or 4 cards, and I have a Sphinx out, which is generating me a ton of card advantage. So my goal is just to live long enough to let my card advantage bury him. So here I'm like lining up blocks.
So damage is going to resolve. No combat tricks going on there.
Nope.
Jake doesn't do anything.
Yeah, and he didn't attack with his Sun Titan, so I take 6 less damage. And because I don't think he wanted me to kill a Sun Titan by being able to double block with a Snapcaster and a Sphinx.
Yep. And sure, like giving him, and then he has that Gideon in his hand. And so the first thing he does, he's going to, +2 Gideon. He's like, I'm going to make that Snapcaster from that Sphinx run into Gideon.
Yeah, so his plan is to block the Snapcaster with one of his Titans and then have 4 counters on the Gideon and be able to kill the Sphinx with the Gideon ability. But
now pay careful attention to what we see from Ponder here, and that first card Drew there was in fact a Sword of War piece.
Yep.
So that's going to make that attacking Gideon situation a little more awkward for Jake. Not what he was really anticipating. Gideon doesn't last as long as he was probably hoping.
Yep.
So Drew's considering what order he's going to put him back in. We obviously know that Sword of War piece is going on top.
I'm absolutely keeping this Ponder. I definitely want... And like all of them were spells, and I've got plenty of land, as you can see, for a double deck,
including some in his hand.
I actually had 1 extra land in my sideboard because when you're siding into more expensive cards like Consecrated Sphinx and Day of Judgment, you want to be able to hit your land drops.
And there's a sword, and Jake's not exactly happy to see it because he knows how that's going to play out. And he originally tries to reach for that Phantasmal image to block, but it's a copy of Sun Titan, so the pro white is.
Yes.
So as you can see,
it's
Jake
a copy.
Is.
It's white. So his Gideon's just going to die here.
But it is a turn that's not going, straight to his face. He's got a handful of cards, keeping you from gaining, 5, 6 life.
Well, I'm at. Let me see if I can remember what my life total is here.
I know that
I'm at 20, I think, right now.
Because I don't think anybody's gotten through yet. You've been able to chump block some things.
No, I'm at 18. I'm at 18 right now.
Oh, did you probe at the beginning?
No, because I cast a timely reinforcement.
That's right.
So that gained me a little bit of life. So I'm currently at 18. So yeah, so I'm drawing some more extra cards off the Sphinx, which again, that's kind of my game plan right now, is to just bury him in card advantage.
And in reality, this Sphinx, when all is said and done, probably drew, maybe 20 cards.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, it's ridiculous.
All right,
now it's not completely one-sided, as you'll see here in a minute, but it's still a lot of cards.
All right, so he goes for a ponder here. I have a Vapor Snag in my hand, and I should have responded it by snagging the Phantasmal image the second one he played, copying the Sphinx.
Yes, so let's point out that Phantasmal image on the far side near the top of the screen is a copy of Consecrated Sphinx.
Correct. So he cast a ponder, and I let it resolve, and I should have snagged the Phantasmal image in response, because I'm going to draw 2 cards off of his ponder here, but what I forget is that he's going to get Sphinx triggers. So this is where kind of the confusion comes in with me having to Vapor Snag his image with Sphinx triggers on the stack, because once I realized my mistake, this is an example of not letting your mistakes compound on themselves by trying to mitigate as much damage as I could, which means that I have to snag with the trigger on the stack, trying to reduce the number of cards he's drawing. So I go to draw 2. He's like, all right, now I'm going to draw. As soon as he says that, I realize I needed to snag the image, because I have a Snapcaster in my hand, so I can on my upkeep Snapcaster snag the image, so he won't draw any cards off of my Sphinx. So now we're
in clarification mode here.
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out what the triggers are. So once I realize this, I say, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put your triggers on the stack, and he's kind of like confused about that, but I'm saying I'm going to put your triggers on the stack my triggers on the stack, sorry. So my triggers are on the stack now, and I'm going to snag. So I still have Sphinx triggers on the stack while I'm snagging the image.
So this is one of those situations, obviously this is a very confusing interaction. Consecrated Sphinx says when when your opponent draws a card, you can draw 2 cards. And when you have both in play, you get these really complex, like, okay, you draw 4, it gets really confusing. And if you come into situations like this, don't be afraid. If you need clarification from a judge or something like that, don't hesitate. It's not a big deal to call a judge if you need clarification on how these interactions are going to happen, because let's face it, even the most veteran players can make mistakes.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. If Jake had felt uncomfortable with this ruling, he can definitely call Aaron and get a rules clarification on it. In reality, after we looked at this and thought about it again, instead of drawing 2 cards, Jake should have drawn 4, not 2, because he really had 2 triggers, not 1 trigger. So he should have been able to draw 4. But I can still stop him from drawing any more than the 4 by putting it on the stack. So yeah, he should have drawn 4. I should have drawn 8. Little bit of a confusion, minor mistake on my part, not intentional at all. I just was trying to stop as much of the triggers as I could.
Yeah.
So here he attacks me down to 4. So I'm at 4 life, staring down a Sun Titan, a Phantasmal image as a Sphinx, and a Snapcaster mage. And I have a Snapcaster with a sword and a Consecrated Sphinx.
So right now, I think Jake's still at a fairly high life total. You haven't been able to put too much pressure on. He's at between 14 and 16 at the moment.
He is at 18.
18.
Yes, so he's at 18.
And Drew's down to 4. Jake's in a good spot. This War and Peace and Snapcaster getting through can definitely cause him trouble if it happens. But having your opponent for life, in most cases, you feel like you have a little bit of breathing room in most cases.
Well, my plan here is, since I've drawn so many cards off of my Sphinx, I'm up to over 10, I think.
I think you counted 11 or something like that.
Yeah, my plan is to just gain all that life off of Sword of War and Peace. That's equipped to Snapcaster Mage, because I can upkeep Snapcaster Vapor Snag his Sphinx, so that way it's back in his graveyard, so he can't block, and his only creatures are white.
In case you're not aware, Phantasmal Image has the clause of when it becomes a target of spell or ability, sacrifice it.
Yeah.
That's why it would be in the graveyard, not back in Jake's hand.
Yeah. I actually want to dismember it here, because I'd rather have the Snapcaster in my hand, but I'm at 4, so I can't cast the dismember.
That's one of the pitfalls of the Phyrexian mana when you're running him off color.
Yep.
You get that low, and you're like, well, that's kind of awkward.
Yeah, so I have to Snapcaster snag the image.
So here comes the Snapcaster. We're going to... So now Jake's looking at his hand. He's still got a chock full of cards, but he knows, he's like, well, I don't have much to do at the moment. It's going to die, and in most cases, that's kind of the situation Drew wants to be in. It's what he had to do to keep Jake from getting any more cards in his hand.
And again, clearing out a blocker so I can gain the life off the Sword of War and Peace. But unfortunately, I'm actually not going to be able to connect here, as we're going to find out really soon. So what you're going to see here is, as Drew's preparing for his attack,
the card that we mentioned earlier, Restoration Angel, in all its glory and all its combat shenanigans.
So I'm counting here, and gonna cast a Ponder. Doesn't actually reduce the number of cards in my hand since I draw the card anyways.
So you have another. I think there's another Consecrated Sphinx in those 3.
Yep.
I think it's going to become important because, let's face it, Consecrated Sphinx is a very high-profile target in Type 2, in Commander. It's the type of card that nobody wants to leave on the battlefield, because even the most beginner or medium-level players realize what type of damage that type of card advantage can do to someone.
Yeah, it can draw you quite a few cards.
As you can see, as you look at Drew cycle through that huge number of cards in his hand multiple times. Okay, so here comes the combat. And Jake's just roaring to go. He's like, I'm ready for this combat.
There's Restoration Angel. So, out of all these cards I've drawn, I have not drawn a single Mana Leak. Because Mana Leak would be awesome here. But I have a negate.
Unfortunately, Restoration Angel don't care about negate.
Yep. So I'm still at 4 life here versus quite the army.
That means the Dismember is still dead. Otherwise, hey, I could. Oh, not 5 life.
Well,
I mean,
now he's got 4 creatures that kill me.
Yep.
With any 4 of those creatures will kill me in an attack step. So even if I could pay for the Dismember, I'm still probably just dead to his board. So what I'm thinking here is how to get out of this situation. And it basically involves Jake having to be willing to trade Sphinx triggers. So now before, when I didn't want him drawing cards off of his Sphinx, now I want him drawing cards off of his Sphinx, because my only out to this situation, because I haven't played a land yet, is a Day of Judgment in my deck.
And despite all those card drawing, it's still not there. So we're going to start some digging again. Everyone's going to fill their hands up. I think you actually end up pitching like 11 cards at the end of turn.
Yeah, the discard step takes like a minute or 2.
So hopefully we'll have something to fill that dead air time, because when you have that many cards, you want to, as Drew said, when we were reviewing this footage, you get to sculpt your hand. What are the most important cards that you want to keep in the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's at a certain point, once you've drawn so many cards, it's almost like, in a lot of ways, it's like getting to Demonic Tutor for 7 cards in your deck. So you're trying to figure out what are the 7 cards I want in my hand, and that's kind of what I'm doing here. So I play a Gataxian Probe for life, so I go to 2.
Gutsy.
So I draw, he draws. I draw, he draws. I draw, he draws. I draw, he draws. So again, I actually need him to be drawing off the triggers here.
Because if he ends up declining before you get to Day of Judgment, you're in a really bad position.
The funny thing is, if he had just said, okay, I'm not going to draw any cards, he actually probably would have won this game, because there's no way I can kill that many creatures with
one Snapcaster.
Yeah, I have to have Day of Judgment. Timely, I don't even think really will do it. Mm-hmm. It might.
Well, the Timely's, because he's got the Restoration Ninja that you're not going to be able to block.
Well, I would gain the life too.
Sure, and it puts you to 8. So as long as he can get, because you went down to 2 for the probe.
Yep.
So if he can get,
I actually don't think he could get.
It would have been close.
Yeah,
you have to count the numbers.
He probably had an Oblivion. I think he had an Oblivion Ring in his hand. I can't remember.
And that's one thing he brought up during the match I played him in round 5, is that he's playing the Oblivion Ring instead of Vapor Snag, because he was looking for more permanent removal, because like you said, this is more of a real control deck rather than the aggro style Delver where you just want a temporary solution to push through damage.
Yeah, Snag's much better in the kind of deck where you are just trying to apply pressure, because in certain matchups they're just going to be able to recast all their cards. I do leave in all the Snags though, even when I shift into the control mode as it was, because being able to buy time, cards like Consecrated Sphinx and Day of Judgment will be able to generate all that card advantage back that you lost for playing Vapor Snag. So
absolutely. So we saw the Day of Judgment. We went to the end of Drew's turn. He's cycling through his hand. He's got to make this cut of what gets to stay, what's going to the graveyard. And Jake's kind of sitting there with his own,
Yeah,
handful of
there's
cards.
actually a little bit of confusion, I think, here again, because I do take a little bit of time to discard, but to be fair, I have like 20 cards in my hand, so I'm trying to decide what to keep. I'm trying to do it as fast as I can, because obviously I don't want to take too much time. So yeah, I'm still like in the process. That's what that giant pile with Restoration Angel sitting on top of it is what I'm currently discarding. I end up discarding all my lands, which I think is a mistake. I should have kept one land so that way I can make sure to have an extra land in play, but ends up not mattering.
When you have so many good cards in your hand, it's hard to like.
Yeah.
I have 8 lands.
Yeah.
You know, do I really want to keep a 9th one? Like,
Yeah,
keep.
but I'm keeping a lot of expensive cards like Consecrated Sphinx, Timely Reinforcements,
Sure.
Restoration Angels. So being able to cast as many of those in my turn is
Sure.
really important, especially when I'm behind on life.
Because it was Consecrated Sphinx is 6, I believe.
Yes.
And Timely Reinforcements is 3. So
Yep.
if you had kept the 9th land, you could have, if you needed to, you know, those could have all happened on one turn,
Yep.
or you know, any other combination of cards. Because, like you said, things like Sphinx is so expensive.
Yeah, so I probably should have figured out a way to keep a land in all these cards I'm discarding. So I'm finally done. I discard like.
Here goes the thump.
Yep. So done. And this is where the confusion happens, because Jake here, when he goes to cast, he says end of turn, and I point out that no, I was just discarding and you were tapped out and you haven't taken your turn yet.
And he realizes that, and not too much, you know, debate going on there.
Yeah.
But you're going to see how quickly.
Well, I mean, he doesn't want to take his turn while I'm discarding, because he'll give me more information for crafting my hand, which is an unfair advantage. So
yeah, you know, absolutely. You need to. A lot of people like to jump the gun with, you know, Evolving Wild, pass a turn, or things like that. You know, let your opponent finish their turn, like Drew said. You know, knowledge is a very big factor in this game, and you know, as you start taking your turn and you're doing things while your person's, you know, still discarding you, by you allowing either one, you shouldn't be allowing them to do that anyways. You need to wait. You know, let the turn finish, proper procedure. But 2, you don't want your opponent, you know, to know like, oh, well, okay, well, we might need this card.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
card.
Yeah.
Just wait it out, be patient, and we're gonna watch Jake's board here go from nothing to, oh man, that's gonna hurt.
Yeah, he has another Sun Titan here, so he gets to completely refill his board.
So we're gonna see a Sun Titan begat Sun Titan, begat Sun Titan, and then we've got a Snapcaster.
Yep, like something out of Greek legend.
and all of a sudden, 20 points of power on the board.
Yep. When I'm at a lovely 2 life.
Yes. And to top it all off, hey, I'll ponder, just because, you know, my hand wasn't big enough as it is. So that puts you in that awkward position, because, once again, none of those guys can stay on the board. You're at 2.
Yep. So, again, I need a way to deal with this board position. Fortunately, after drawing a million cards, I happen to have another Day of Judgment.
And you've sided in 2, right?
Correct, yeah. Okay. I had 2 in the sideboard. And you end up drawing a lot with this deck anyways, between Ponders and Gataxian Probes. Because I try to leave as much of the card drawing in as I can.
Sure.
Because most control decks like to play a lot of lands, but Delver only plays 21 or 22. So after sideboarding, I still only have 22. So you want to be able to hit your land drops, you know, but leaving in those card drawing spells means you hit more of your land drops, means you hit more of the important spells, and so it's a little bit easier to hit a 2 of Day of Judgment. So nice thing is he's tapped out, so I get to do whatever I want this turn, and I get a Gataxian Probe, so I get information to know what's in his hand.
We see things like Batter Skull. We see, I think, is that Restoration Angel?
I'm not sure if that's another, like,
maybe
a promo.
Not.
There's a Silverblade Paladin and a Day of Judgment.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it's a Silverblade Paladin, a Day of Judgment, a Batter Skull, 2 Snapcasters.
Like, that's a Plains at the end there. So, you know, you're in down, obviously, you know everything in his hand. You know, perfect knowledge of your opponent's fantastic, like you've mentioned before in other videos. Having that, being able to play things, knowing what your opponent's responses are, definitely, you know, shapes your turn. Not to, you know, pick on Jake here, but for example, we sat down to play in round 5, and you know, Jake and I talk a lot. You know, he's a nice guy. We talk about, you know, decks we're playing, and you see Drew has to play that Day of Judgment to wipe off that 20 power, but he inadvertently let slip that he wasn't playing Vapor Snacks before we started playing. So I'm playing my Blue-White Humans deck, and I played completely unafraid of Vapor Snags, and you know, it did what it needed to do. So it's that type of, you know, information that your opponent knows, you know, if you know their whole hand, if you know what's in their deck. It just, you know, obviously some stuff's going to happen. People are going to talk. You're going to play against your opponents you've seen before. But during the game, you want to try to minimize and maximize the information, like you said before.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, me knowing what's in his hand and him not knowing. I mean, he is playing Gataxian Probe though, but it was used early, and he doesn't have one here, so he doesn't get to see what's going on in my hand. So all I have in play right now is a Snapcaster and a Sword, and he's at 14, and I'm still at 2.
So Jake's still in a good spot, you know. You figure any deck like this, I just need to push 2 damage through, you know.
And that's exactly what I think is going through his head is like, how do I get as many threats into play as I can?
So there's a Blade Splicer.
Yep. So there's kind of 2 threats. I mean, you still have to be wary that if I do get a Sword hit in, I get to gain a lot of life back.
Easily with a full hand of cards that moves you out of the danger zone.
Yep. Well, one advantage of him being blue-white is that he doesn't have a lot of reach. I'm pretty sure he's not playing Vapor Snag, like you were saying. He mentioned it to you, and I haven't seen it at all in any of these games, even after him drawing 40 cards, or a million cards, basically. And so I'm pretty sure he doesn't have Vapor Snags. Haven't seen any. Obviously didn't see any in the Gataxian Probe. So now I'm counting. You're going to see me do some counting in my head before I draw. Because you'll get to see why I'm counting here.
So on the end there, in case it's a little shiny, because it's one of the box promos of Silverblade Paladin.
Yep, yeah. So Jake's board is a Silverblade Paladin, a 3/3 Golem, and a Blade Splicer. So
and I'm pretty sure the Golem is paired with the Silverblade Paladin.
Yeah, the Sword means the only creature that can block right now is a Golem on board, but I know he has a Snapcaster in his hand.
So we've seen this match before. I think what you're going to see right now is the O-ring is essentially permanent removal for the Golem.
Yep. And most players, your initial instinct, because I actually have a Vapor Snag in my hand, your initial instinct is to snag the Golem because you permanently remove it. But this is one of those situations where context matters. So instead of using the Vapor Snag on the Golem, I know he has a Snapcaster in his hand, so I need to O-ring the Golem. Because now what I'm going to do is I have an image in my hand. So I image the Silverblade Paladin, which... this is another example of knowing how to correctly cast your spells. You can't hear it, but when I cast the image, I say Phantasmal Image, is that okay? Meaning if he top decked a Mana Leak, he doesn't know what I'm actually copying. And I'm copying the Silverblade Paladin.
So he's paired with the now sorted up Snapcaster, who now has Double Strike.
Yep. So now... not only he's a 4/3, so he would do 8 points of damage. I also get 2 sword triggers as well because of the double strike. So I'm actually, before I even cast the Vapor Snag, when he taps the mana, I'm just going to snag the Snapcaster.
Because like I said, you knew it was in there from the probe. You had that perfect knowledge. You're like, well, this is what's going to happen. He's going to try to do this. That sword's going to get in there. I think in the audio we say 16.
Yep, he's at 14. He takes 1 from the Vapor Snag, and then the combat damage plus the sword trigger is 16.
And all Jake can really do at this point is go...
Yep. Yeah. I mean, like I said, he had one card that he top decked that I didn't know what it was, and I was pretty sure it was not, because like I said, I hadn't seen any Vapor Snags, I hadn't seen any Dismembers, and going for the kill there, I think, is perfectly reasonable.
Because he's playing it, O-rings and things like that, and if he just has to get that 2 points of damage through it. It's not going to take much for him to do it.
Yep. Yeah. So. This game is an example of, number one, don't concede until you're dead, because there was probably several instances where it looked like there's no way I could win this game. Another example is when you make a mistake, don't let your mistake compound on itself. Yep. Do what you can to continue playing correctly.
Sure.
Because if you let it get in your head that, oh, I made a mistake, and oh, I could have won the game if I would have played differently, you'll just continue to make mistakes, and that's still problematic. You're going to make mistakes when you're playing games. Yeah. Period. It's going to happen.
You hear that from, card games. You hear it from professional athletes. Sometimes you have to shrug off the losses. Sometimes they're your fault. Sometimes your opponent just played better. And if you let them get to you, it will affect how you play. Sometimes you just lose.
Yep, exactly. So don't let mistakes compound. Don't concede until you're actually dead is probably my number one philosophy. And yeah, so it was actually a really interesting game, very back and forth. I was constantly having to do things to stay in that game as much as I could.
As you took that very early beatdown, and plenty of times where Jake quickly filled up that board, and you're like, well, I have to deal with this right now.
One card gave him like 20 points of power, like you said. So yeah, very interesting game. I had a lot of fun playing it. So
So I hope you enjoyed that video. We hope you join us in Game 3, where we're going to cover another one of Drew's games. But he plays against Spencer's Reanimation deck that ended up winning last week. So we hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yep.